One cold morning, Ethan unexpectedly discovers a mysterious wooden box on his porch containing a sparkling antique coin and a check for $50,000. There is no name from whom it was sent, no message except for the words engraved on the lid: "To thank you for not turning your back on kindness." Confused and amazed, Ethan can't stop thinking about the man he met on the street a few days ago, veteran Walter with his broken-down pickup truck. Could this gift have something to do with him? Unaware that his life is about to change forever, Ethan sets out to find out the truth behind this unexpected gift. Welcome to Kindness Stories, where stories of kindness and goodness are told with all our hearts. Today, we will explore a surprising story where just one small act can change a life. Listen and feel, because sometimes kindness will come back to you in unexpected ways. Listen and feel, because sometimes kindness will come back to you in unexpected ways. The dim morning light filtered through the thin curtains, illuminating Ethan's tired face. He opened his eyes, looking at the cracked ceiling with a heavy sigh. Today was payday, but he knew it wouldn't be enough to pay the bills piled on the kitchen table. Electricity, water, rent, and even the bank loan all weighed down on him like invisible monsters. Ethan is a man in his 30s, lean and tanned from days spent working outdoors. He works part-time as a porter at a nearby warehouse, but the company has recently cut hours because of the economic downturn. He went from making enough to make ends meet to struggling to survive. Ethan's small house was on the edge of town, where the narrow, winding streets were deserted in the early morning. It was an old house, with a dull brown tiled roof and a front yard littered with fallen leaves. He'd thought about cleaning up the yard, but when it came to choosing between paying the bills and buying gardening tools, the priority was clear. Ethan pulled up a chair at the kitchen table and stared at the pile of papers in front of him. A notice from the bank demanding payment of a past-due loan. A letter from the power company warning of power cuts if payment was not made within 7 days. His fingers flicked the paper, his eyes following the bold letters silently, as if asking himself, "What should I do now?" The clock on the wall ticked steadily, reminding him that it was time to go to work. Ethan stood up, put on his old coat, and stepped outside. The cold autumn air brushed against his face, but he didn't mind. He was used to the cold, as well as the feeling of loneliness and fatigue. As Ethan drove home from work, he noticed that his gas tank was already at the red line. With the little money left in his wallet, he told himself he would only fill up enough to get him through a few more days of work. As he drove slowly down the deserted road, his eyes fell on an old pickup truck parked on the side of the road. The hood was wide open, and beside it stood the figure of an elderly man, struggling. Ethan hit the brakes, hesitating for a moment. He could have gone on and ignored the other. He had enough on his plate. But then he shook his head. "No one should be stuck on this road," he muttered, pulling over and stepping out. As he was cut through the traffic came an officer lying face down in the car's parking lot, propped against a wall. "It's the rainy season." Ethan walked over to the pickup, his eyes scanning the dusty old body. The man standing there looked old, in his 60s, but he stood straight and his eyes were sharp. He was bent over the engine, his hands smeared with oil. A small faded military badge was on the chest of his gray jacket, and that caught Ethan's attention. "Need any help, Uncle?" Ethan asked, hands in his coat pockets to ward off the cold. The man looked up, his eyes slightly surprised. He squinted at Ethan as if assessing his trustworthiness. After a moment of silence, he smiled slightly. "I guess I do. My car just died. I think it was the spark plug wire, but I don't have the tools to check," he replied, his voice low and husky. "Luckily for you, I have the tools," Ethan said, hurrying to his trunk. He pulled out an old toolbox and grabbed some pliers and wrenches. "Have you tried restarting the engine?" he asked as he headed for the engine. The mechanized parts rocked and moved, leaving Patricia wrapped in despair. "I tried, but all I heard was a click and then silence," the man replied, his eyes slightly embarrassed. "I'm Walter, a veteran. Used to drive tanks in the Army, but now I can't even fix my pickup truck." "Tanks are different from pickup trucks, Uncle," Ethan chuckled, bending down to inspect the engine. "I'm Ethan, and I know a little about cars because I used to work as a porter in a warehouse with old, broken-down trucks." Walter stood beside him, staring at Ethan with interest. "I think I got you right. A young man, busy, but still stopping to help a stranger. You are rare these days, Ethan." "I don't think so," Ethan replied, still twisting the wrench. "If you saw someone in need, you'd do the same." About 20 minutes later, Ethan wiped his hands on a rag and nodded to Walter. "I think I'm done. Let's try starting the car." Walter got in and turned the key. The engine roared, the truck coming to life. Walter laughed, a hearty laugh, as if he had just won a battle. He got out of the car and slapped Ethan on the shoulder. "You did great, Ethan. You really saved my day. Just a little luck." Ethan shrugged. "You should get your car checked soon, or no one will stop to help you next time." Walter looked at Ethan for a long time. His eyes were quiet, as if he was thinking about something. Then he reached into his pocket and took out some money, trying to give it to Ethan. "Take this as payment. You deserve it." Ethan shook his head in refusal. "No need, Uncle. It's just a small matter." Mike faced the rest of the family and spoke softly. "Your kindness is not small, Ethan," Walter said, his voice growing more serious. "You have no idea how important it is." Ethan chuckled. "I was just doing what everyone should do." The words echoed in Ethan's mind as he drove home. He didn't think much of it, but somewhere in his heart, he felt a little lighter. Sometimes, just doing a good deed can soothe the soul. Ethan had no idea that tomorrow Walter's words would come true, and it would change his life forever. Ethan woke up with a start to the sound of his alarm clock. He lazily reached over to turn it off, then lay there for a few more minutes, staring at the old ceiling. A new day had begun, and like any other, the pressure of unpaid bills and unsettled bank debts was suffocating him. He sat up, rubbing his face a few times to clear away the fatigue. The sky outside the window was gray, a light mist hanging over the distant treetops. Ethan pulled on a light sweater and headed for the front door. He wasn't used to getting the mail early, but something about this morning made him want to step out onto the porch. The door creaked as it opened. A blast of cold air rushed in, making him shiver, but his eyes immediately fell on an unfamiliar object lying on the porch. A small box wrapped in brown craft paper, tied neatly with a small rope. There was no sender's name, no label. Ethan frowned, looking around the porch and the deserted street ahead. No one was there, no sign of anyone leaving. "Who would leave something like this?" he muttered. He bent down to pick up the box and shook it gently. There was no sound from inside. Curiosity made Ethan quickly carry the box into the kitchen. He took a small knife from the table, carefully cut the rope, and peeled off the wrapping paper. Inside was a small, polished wooden box that looked old but was still very sturdy. On the lid of the box there was a small but sharp, hand-carved line. Next to the line wrote, "To thank the person who did not turn his back on kindness." Ethan felt his heart beat slower. A strange feeling rose in his chest. He sat down in the chair, placed the box on the table, took a deep breath, and opened the lid. Inside was a shiny metal coin nestled in a red silk cloth. The coin looked old, but it was meticulously engraved with strange symbols Ethan had never seen before. It looked like a rare coin you only saw on antique TV shows. Underneath the coins, he found a thick white envelope. Ethan's hand shook slightly as he opened the envelope, and as soon as he saw what was inside, his breath stopped. A check. No ordinary check. It was a check for $50,000. His eyes widened, his heart pounding. He looked at the check again to make sure he hadn't seen it wrong. "What the hell is going on?" he whispered, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it pounding in his chest. There was no letter of explanation, no name of the sender, just the wooden box, the old coin, and the giant check. Ethan felt like he was in a dream. He sat there, staring at the check in his hand, not knowing if this was a gift from an angel or someone's trick. Ethan spent nearly half an hour staring at the check, wondering what to do next. Part of him said it was too good to be true. Could it be a scam, he wondered, not daring to believe that he could receive such a large sum of money from a stranger. But on the other hand, the words on the box kept echoing in his head, to thank the one who did not turn his back on kindness. Suddenly, Walter's image appeared in his mind, his old army jacket, his sharp but kind eyes, and his parting words. "Good things will come to you, Ethan." He shook his head, trying to clear the thought. It can't be him," he said. But his heart wanted to believe it was true. Determined not to let his doubts control him, Ethan drove to the bank in town. He stood in line, anxious, thinking about the possibility that the teller would return the check and say it was fake. When it was his turn, Ethan placed the check on the counter, looking at the teller with concern. "I want to check to see if this check is valid," he said, his voice dry. The clerk took the check, flipped it over and over, then entered the data into the computer. Tension filled the air. Ethan stared at the clerk's face, waiting for her reaction. After a few minutes, she looked up, smiling. "This check is perfectly legal, Ethan. Would you like to deposit it directly into my account?" Ethan was shocked. A feeling of relief and excitement flooded through him. "Yes, please." As he walked out of the bank, he stood on the sidewalk, feeling the cold air blow past him. But this time, the cold didn't numb him. He felt warm, as if the sun had risen in his heart. This money would change everything. He could pay off his bank loan, pay his electricity and water bills, and buy more groceries. Ethan called the bank and paid off his loan in full. A week later, he received a letter from the bank saying his loan had been cleared. He no longer received warning letters. Ethan also used some of the money to renovate the house. The old roof was now rethatched and no longer leaked when it rained. He bought some basic household items to replace the old ones. But more important than that was the feeling of freedom. For the first time in years, he didn't have to worry about bills coming due. He could sleep soundly without being woken up in the middle of the night by the bank's buzzing alarm. Tide-bottom panic attacked his heart. However, instead of thinking only about himself, Ethan also began to think more about the people around him. One day, while on his way home, he saw a homeless man sitting on the sidewalk, shivering from the cold. He stopped the car. It was the same action as the day he had stopped to help Walter. Ethan walked over to the man, took some money from his pocket, and placed it in his hand. "Here, have something to eat," he said. The man raised his head, his cloudy eyes brightening with gratitude. Ethan just smiled and turned away. That small act reminded Ethan of a lesson he had learned. Kindness always comes back, sometimes in the most unexpected ways. That morning, the gentle sunlight shone through the window, making Ethan's kitchen warmer than ever. The chirping of birds echoed in the yard, mixed with the sound of the kettle boiling on the stove. Ethan was making coffee, feeling a rare peace in his heart. Now everything in his little house had changed. The walls were painted, the roof no longer leaked. The kitchen had a new refrigerator and a microwave that he never thought he could afford. More importantly, Ethan's fear of debt had been replaced by a sense of peace and freedom. As he sipped his coffee, a soft click sound came from the mailbox in front of the door. This time, Ethan was in no hurry. Putting down his coffee cup, he walked to the door and opened the mailbox. Inside was a light yellow envelope, thicker than usual. There was no sign of a bank or any service company. Curious, he tore open the envelope on the spot. Inside was a handwritten letter, the handwriting firm but neat. Ethan recognized the name at the bottom. Walter. Dear Ethan, if you're reading this, then I'm guessing your life has changed a little. You could have walked away that day, but you didn't. You didn't mind getting your hands dirty to help me fix my bike, and that tells me what kind of person you are. I've met many people in my life, on the battlefield and in the peaceful days that followed, but few were as kind as you. You helped others without expecting anything in return. But sometimes kindness needs to be rewarded, and I have decided to be the one to repay you. The coin in the box is not just any coin. It is a valuable collectible. You may not know it, but coin collectors will pay a lot of money for it. But to me, you are more valuable than that coin. The check I am sending you is not to reward you, but to remind you that kindness is always reciprocated. You deserve a chance to rebuild your life without the burden of financial burden. Don't look for me. I'm gone. My mission here is done. But if you ever meet someone who needs help, remember that you are continuing my journey. I wish you well and believe that there is still good in the world. Leaving aside one's nationality for a moment, please consider practice. Walter. Ethan read the letters slowly, word by word, as if he were afraid he might miss something. His throat tightened. His heart skipped a beat with emotion. As it turned out, the mysterious gift was indeed from Walter. He wasn't some anonymous man, but the man Ethan had stopped to help on the road. Walter? Ethan repeated the name silently, his eyes on the window where sunlight filtered through the trees. He was gone. Maybe he had left town, or maybe he had left this world. Either way, his presence was still there, not just in the letter, but in Ethan's heart. He held the letter, his fingers lightly tracing Walter's handwriting. Each word, each stroke, seemed to express sincerity and gratitude. A man who had driven a tank, a veteran who had spent his youth fighting, had now chosen to leave his mark in a simple yet profound way. Ethan sat in silence for a long time. His mind was a jumble of emotions. He thought about his life, about the days when he felt like a loser. But it turned out that just a little kindness could change his whole world. All of the people who had put him down had been his father. Ethan drove to town that day, aimlessly. He followed the same road where he had stopped to help Walter the day before. The memory of that day was as clear as if it had happened yesterday. Walter's image, his tired but sincere smile, was still fresh in his mind. Sometimes later, Ethan and Larry were driving with Walter and Penny through the surrounding town. When he reached the intersection, he stopped at a red light. At the corner, he saw a woman standing next to her car, holding her phone and looking worried. Her car appeared to be broken down, and she was looking around as if expecting someone to help. Ethan looked at his watch. He had no appointments. No one was waiting for him anywhere, and this time, he didn't have to think. He turned on his signal and pulled over. "Do you need any help?" he asked loudly, getting out of the car. The woman turned back, her eyes filled with surprise but also a glimmer of hope. "Yes, my car died and I didn't know what to do," she said, her voice trembling. Angela repeatedly reassured her that nothing had been happening and that he was fine. "It's okay, I have tools in the car, we'll figure it out," Ethan chuckled. opening the trunk and taking out his toolbox. This time, there was no hesitation in his actions. As he bent down to inspect the engine, he sensed something different. Before, Ethan had helped Walter out of a sense of duty, but this time, he did it for a bigger reason. He did it because he had learned the value of kindness, and he wanted to pass on that lesson. As the woman's car started again, she turned to Ethan with a beaming smile. "Thank you so much. I don't know what I would do without you." Ethan wiped his hands on a rag, remembering his old self. He smiled, not out of gratitude, but knowing that he now understood the true meaning of kindness. Mia. On the way home, the sunset illuminated the road. Rays of sunlight filtered through the leaves, creating sparkling streaks of light on the car windows. Ethan rolled down the window and took a deep breath of the fresh air. His life has changed. He is no longer in debt, no longer worried about tomorrow, but the most precious thing is that he realized that he has become a different person. A person who not only receives kindness, but also spreads it to the world. The last line of Walter's letter flashed through his mind like a small but bright flame. "I wish you well and believe that there is still good in the world." Ethan smiled slightly and drove home. Today, Walter's journey was over, but Ethan's journey had just begun. Thank you for following today's story on kindnessstories.acts. Of kindness not only change the lives of others, but sometimes they also open up unexpected opportunities for ourselves. If you find this story meaningful, please share it to spread kindness to more people. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next warm stories. Remember, your small action today can be someone's miracle tomorrow.